If you aspire to grow a big portfolio, after a point in time in your personal name, you probably will run out of borrowing capacity. Risk, there's also commensurate reward, and there's also downside as well. So I suppose the key thing to try and do is, if we're talking about property and investing, like how much risk are you taking? How much leverage are you putting yourself under? If you're a young person, for example, I know there's a lot of flashy, shiny things that are out there. It takes discipline, but the reward is there as well. The people that I've seen that have done really well with property, they have made sacrifices, surrounding themselves with really smart people.
Awesome. We are here for this episode. We've got Roger Frederick from Trident Financial going to give us some advice from an accountant for this cash flow podcast episode. Thank you so much for coming, Roger.
Thanks for having me, Keith.
Awesome. So if I were to give you 60 seconds to introduce yourself, can you please tell us what you do and the biggest problem that you solve for clients?
Sure. Put simply, we help clients save tax, which increases their cash flow, makes them have more opportunity to make better decisions in their personal lives and their business lives. So we work with private clients all across Australia doing that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And how long have you been doing this for?
Probably started over a decade ago. So a little while. Yeah.
Yep. And so a lot of questions, when I do a lot of networking, a lot of questions that I do get asked is there a best property structure for my property investing, or is it just a myth that investors should stop believing?
Yeah, look, I'm going to give you that generic response. It depends.
Yeah.
Most people when they buy their first property, they've probably just purchased in their own name, and it's simple and it works at that point in time. But I suppose if the circumstances change and your goals change, that's what's going to shape which structure is going to work for you. And there's heaps of different types of structures. If you're an accumulator, you can accumulate big portfolios in your own personal name, but there are some challenges after a point in time with how much you can borrow. So that's probably where you need a really good mortgage broker. But generally, people that I've seen that have got bigger property portfolios with bigger cash flows generally have done it through trusts and companies and things like that. And another thing that I'm seeing a lot of is a lot of people sort of in that age where they've got a few $100,000 in super, they're starting to also think about investing via self-managed super funds. So that's another strategy as well that I've seen a lot of people use as well.
Yep. Yeah. So for someone that is thinking of getting into the property investment game, right? They're thinking of investing in their first property.
Yeah.
What structure would you recommend?
I'm guessing you could be a young person, right? So, or you could be any age. It doesn't really matter. It just depends on your circumstances. One of the terms that we sort of refer to is, are you an at-risk individual, or were you likely to become one? So what I mean by that is, are you running a business, where you're inherently exposed to risk, or do you have a passion to maybe run a business one day? Because that could shape what the right structure could be for you. So I suppose my default would be make sure you speak to your accountant, go through your circumstances with them, or if you have a financial advisor or someone like that, I'd speak to them.
Yep.
And if I was to pare it back even further, make sure you've got a good team behind you. Make sure you've got a good accountant, a good mortgage broker, maybe a financial advisor if that's appropriate for you, and lean on them to try and get advice. And if you don't have a good one, keep looking for one until you find one.
Yep. And why is it important to have a good structure or the right structure, for the different circumstances?
Yeah, sure. So I think a key thing that's currently trending is around your borrowing capacity. So if you aspire to grow a big portfolio, after a point in time in your personal name, you probably will run out of borrowing capacity.
Yep.
So that's where some investors use trusts and structures like that to try and increase their capacity. And the other main reason we use structures is around tax planning and asset protection. So, I mentioned the at-risk individual concept. So if you are or likely to become one, you want to make sure you structure it right as well. And then there's even longer term things to think about around succession planning. How are you going to pass this on to the next generation? So that's when structures might help. Where you can pass the control on of a trust to maybe a child or another family member.
Yeah. Awesome. So most people listening to this podcast will most likely have a growth mindset. They really want to grow their wealth.
Yeah.
This podcast is all about being curious about cash flow, right? They want to try and maximize cash flow so that they can think of new strategies or ways to really grow their wealth, right? Sometimes some people, they might have a grow at all cost mindset. So as a chartered accountant and advisor, how would you help ambitious people like that balance their approach?
Yeah, great question. So growth at all costs mindset means that you're likely to be accepting a lot of risk, right? So, risk, there's also commensurate reward and there's also downside as well. So I suppose the key thing to try and do is, if we're talking about property and investing, like how much risk are you taking? How much leverage are you putting yourself under?
Yep.
So, I'd probably break it down to really simple principles and go become good friends with Excel,
Yep.
Because I heard something recently that, everything is created twice. First it's created in the mind and then it's created in reality. But, as an accountant, I think everything is first created in an Excel spreadsheet before it's created in reality.
Yep.
So I think, but you can make an Excel spreadsheet look really great and sexy, but you've got to be realistic in putting in all of the assumptions, when you're investing, what's it going to look like, how much income, what are the expenses, and not just for here and now, what's it going to look like in the future? Because, you hear the property folks talk about property cycles, right? So, it's a long-term thing. A cycle could be 7 to 10 years. So if you are wanting to grow at all costs, it's almost like a roller coaster. You got to hold on for the cycle as you go up and down. So I think it's important to be able to think about your circumstances. What risks are you taking on board? And probably the last thing I'd probably say is, the circumstances that you're in right now, where you have this grow at all costs mindset, that may evolve and change as life goes on. You may have a family that comes into the picture. You may have a spouse that has different motivations. So you just want to think about some of those things before you go all in and grow at all costs. So I'm not saying don't do it, but just have a think about, what's the plan in life. And then invest. One more thing. The people that I've seen that have done really well with property, they have made sacrifices. They have been disciplined in saving, in managing what they're spending, to get in and to leverage the growth in the portfolio to get into number 2 and 3. So, are you willing to do that? Right? If you're a young person, for example, I know there's a lot of flashy, shiny things that are out there, but it takes discipline, but the reward is there as well. I've seen people make a lot of money through property.
So when you say discipline and sacrifice, what do you mean?
So if you want to grow at all costs, the cost on you is probably going to be the discipline and the luxuries and how much money you're spending elsewhere to then create the savings and the equity to be able to then invest and then multiply the number of properties you hold, right? So, I suppose it's a bit of an extreme statement when you go at all costs. But, it just comes down to your goals. How hard are you willing to work towards your goals, right?
Because I'm just thinking before I started this business, when I was thinking of starting Mork Interiors, and I was doing sales for another company, and the founder was saying, that it sounded like he had a growth at all cost mindset, and his way of, disciplining himself or saving costs as well, so that he can try and maximize and grow his wealth, right, was for 1 year he was just eating instant noodles, and that was his way of trying to save costs, maximize cash flow that he can reinvest and redeploy in his business to help grow his wealth, right? That to me seems to be the extreme. I want to make sure I'm looking after my health. I've got family now. I want to make sure I look after myself, right?
Absolutely.
So and my family. So to me, I mean, discipline, sacrifice. That's something that's really sounds very important for anyone who still wants to grow, but keeping in mind what cost that you're not. They're going to be able to live to see some of the rewards that you're going to invest in. So,
what I might add to that is discipline and sacrifice sounds like extreme words, right? But sometimes it's just simply choices. Do I eat out or do I eat at home? Do I spend on this or do I catch the train? Do I save on tolls? We're talking about small things here, but sometimes it's the accumulation of choices, and that's part of the discipline of it as well. Because convenience, costs money sometimes.
Awesome. And so for for some of the listeners who might be investors already, they might have one or two under their portfolio, one or two properties, and they definitely want to grow. But like you said, they might have a family, they might have some things that might impede on their cash flow as well, right? So lifestyle choices and all that. So what are three top tips that you would give to them to help optimize their cash flow, and also, whilst also being able to keep that growth for their portfolio as well?
Yeah, excellent. I think a common thing with a lot of people is that they don't watch the money. They don't review their statements, and they sign up to a lot of direct debits, Stan, Netflix, Disney, all of the above. And sometimes those things get out of hand because, everything is monetized through a subscription nowadays, and you might need the service at the point in time that you signed up to it, but you may not need it afterwards. But it's like a silent tax eating away at your cash flow.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So one tip is I'd say keep your eye on the money. Log in and review your accounts.
Yep.
So that'll be number one. Number two, you got to have a system in place, right? You might have heard of the Barefoot Investor, who is got a really famous book in Australia, and he uses a bucket system where he has an amount that goes into his spend bucket, and then he's also investing and saving accounts as well. So I think having a system in place where you know what you're allowed to spend, and then having a strict plan and how you manage the rest is probably a good thing. And I suppose if we here's another handy tip is, a lot of people are really bad at keeping records, right? So if we're talking about cash flow, we're talking about, hey, how do we minimize expenses, increase income? That's how you increase cash flow. And one of the biggest expenses in Australia is tax. Right. So how do you pay less tax? How do you be on top of that? You've got to be organised with your records. And the best way I've seen it done, and this is the way that I do it personally myself, is whenever there is something that is deductible or maybe deductible, I take a photo of it and I email it to myself, and I simply in the title call it tax deduction 2026. So straight away at the end of the year, when it comes to tax time, I haven't missed that donation to that charity or that fund run that has got a deductible gift receipt that I can get, and I try and capture everything.
How do you maintain balance between capital growth and cash flow once you've entered into a more mature stage of your investment journey? They've invested in one or two, then they might feel slightly stuck, or they're not sure how to grow to a third or fourth. So how do you maintain that balance so that they can then also continue to grow their portfolio?
Yeah, sure. I think with property, it's such a big purchase, right? So a lot of people invest a lot of emotion in the process. I think what you need to try and find a way to do is take the emotion out of it and just look at what is the results that the property is doing for you. Is it cash flow? Is it growth? And you can never really perfectly time the market, but if cash flow becomes a higher priority, and the assets or the properties that you hold aren't generating that, it might be time to sell. There's a time to invest in the market, there's a time to get out of the market, and there's a time to switch the type of properties that you have. So I think you should pay attention to what the property is doing, and just be really clear on what the goal is. And if you do have a mature property portfolio as well, you also might want to think about what I'm guessing potentially you've been in the game for a little while in that scenario, and you might also want to think about what's your succession look like. What do you want to do with this? Do you want to hand it off to children, or do you want to help them out with their mortgages? Because property prices are pretty big right now, and they can only get bigger. So I think if you can give them a bit of a hand, that might be something that you might want to consider around the transition and transfer piece. But I think to summarise, I'd say assess the properties, see what they're doing for you, and make a decision.
Awesome. So I'm sure at Trident Financials, you guys work with a lot of people from all walks of life, right? So, there could be high income earners, middle income earners, maybe even business owners as well. Could you give each of these people one word of advice when it comes to investing?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, we work across all of that, all around Australia. The first piece of advice I'd say is speak to your accountant. Even if you're a client of ours or if you've got another accountant, reach out and speak to your accountant on a regular basis. Within reason, right? But you need to have a good idea of what's happening in tax, in the marketplace. What are other people doing? Because the accountants and our firm, we're exposed to stuff. We get training every single week, and we get exposed to what's happening all across the market in businesses and in tax all the time. So you want to stay current. You don't want to miss out on an opportunity that you could have done if you had simply had a conversation. So I'd say speak to your accountant, whether it's us or your existing accountant, be in conversation with them.
Yep.
And you need to really build a team that understand what your goals are, because no one that has achieved any level of success in property or any facet of life has done it on their own. There's always been other people around that's supported them. So within Trident, we've got lots of different services to support different needs. So understand what those are, and then I suppose in the property space, it'd be having a really solid mortgage broker, having a solid accountant, having your financials and tax returns up to date, i.e. the record keeping I talked about, that comes into play if you want to be able to capitalise on opportunities. And also networking with property professionals as well. And you've got to do your own research. Like, things don't just happen. You've got to lean into it. So you've got to be on the mailing list. You've got to listen to podcasts like this. You've got to stay educated and up to date. Yes, I know you said one piece of advice, but there's a lot there. But I think if property is of interest to you, you've got to lean in and be clued into what's happening in property.
For a business owner like myself, right? So that's absolutely great advice, because I do a lot of networking. But for people who don't do a lot of networking, people who are working corporate and they are doing the 9 to 5, they don't have a lot of opportunity to meet new people, meet other business owners or other advisors like yourself, to help grow their wealth, right? So what advice would you give them to really try and maintain cash flow and also grow their wealth as well?
What else? I'll give you what advice not to do.
Okay, awesome.
Right?
Yep.
So don't take everything you hear at the barbecue or at the water cooler as gospel, because everyone has an opinion, especially when it comes to property, and it may or may not be an accurate one. So I think, unqualified opinions. Don't act on unqualified opinions.
So like the latest one is, invest in Pokemon cards. Would that be?
Exactly right. That's a fad. I watched Pokemon back in the day. Maybe there's something to it. But no, I'd say. So really, what the advice there is: make sure if you don't have the professionals in your network, I suppose the onus comes back onto you to find them and build a relationship with them. So you don't necessarily need to go to lots of networking events to do that, but try and find them. They're out there, and a lot of them have got online presences, podcasts and content that they put out. But just be wary as well, right? So do your research, look for the client testimonials, speak to their customers, and find the professionals, because you've got to build the team around you to succeed.
Would it be fair to say to also test some of the advice that you hear, even from advisors, right? What do we say? Like today, you mentioned to have a spreadsheet. So to see if there's some of the advice that they've learned online or whoever they're talking to really see if that makes sense for their situation, the financial situation, especially through Excel spreadsheets that they would have created as well. Because I've got Excel spreadsheets for budgets. I try to create, spreadsheets for, to plan. I'm not a natural planner. My wife is. And so we try to work together, right? But at the end of the day, you don't know what you don't know. And that's why, I love to network and learn from, advisors and people like you. And so, that's why, for people who are listening, like exactly what Roger said, you really have to surround yourself with a team. Make sure you also know your numbers, like you mentioned, know what's going in, what's going out. Have a spreadsheet. You'd be very surprised. I'm actually very surprised lately where a lot of people don't have spreadsheets tracking. Even though I have my own spreadsheet, I don't track everything. My wife does.
Yeah.
So I'm very thankful for her. But even then, like, you'd be surprised. Like some people do spreadsheets, and you go like, how do you plan? How do you know what's going in and out?
Yeah.
And then at the end of the year, they go like, how come I only have X amount in the bank, right?
Yeah.
So and with that, then if you want to, invest in property, how do you even start? So I think what you share is really valuable, and it's very simple, but it's so important as well, right?
Absolutely. So. But I will say one thing. I had this one extremely successful client. He had never ever logged into his accounting software, let alone opened a spreadsheet in his life, and he's worth millions and millions of dollars, right?
Yeah.
So some people are not geared towards spreadsheets, right? Yeah. That's not their personality style, and that's fine. So I recently read a book called Who Not How by Dan Sullivan, I think it was. And essentially the premise of the book is finding the who's in your life. You don't need to know how to do everything, but you need to find a who that knows how to do the how.
Yep.
So if in your circumstance, your who is your wife.
Yeah.
She takes care of that stuff for you, right?
Yeah.
For some people, it'll be their accountants. It might be maybe within their friendship group, they actually have a really savvy individual that is all over that. So I suppose you've got to find your who. It might be an advisor or a specialist. But if you've got the skills and you're orientated to do spreadsheets, then absolutely make sure you track stuff.
Yep. So Roger, tell us, why do you do what you do? What made you choose to be an accountant?
Yeah, great question. So I like variety. Right, and in my role, I get to work with lots of different people, a lot of interesting and smart people, and many of them are really passionate about what they do. They're passionate about, say, growing their portfolio to serve their family, or growing their business to make an impact in their communities. And I love that. I take from their energy, and I like to try and give them energy as well. Through advice and through supporting them through their goals, and I just love seeing the timeline. I might have I'll give you a perfect example. I had a client that was started off with us running a business, and he was doing about $300,000 a year. Grew it till about $7 million a year in turnover. It was sold out to some private equity people, and that business is now doing almost $40 million a year. So
wow.
I knew him from 300 to 40 million.
Wow.
And I love seeing what's the decisions that have been made, how have they structured the deals, what drives them. And then that sort of drives me as well. And then I like to take the best of those that are doing really well and share that, in a confidential basis. I don't name names with my other clients that are in different stages, right? So I love that. I love being able to speak to different people and help them on their journey, whatever it is that they're trying to achieve. And that just drives me.
Yep. And through all the people that you've helped and you've serviced and really helped them grow their portfolio, their wealth, what's been the biggest lesson that you've learned so far?
That's a great question. I suppose everyone is different and everyone's circumstances are different. But all of those that have done really well in growing property, business and whatever it is, they've invested energy and time behind that, and they've surrounded themselves with really smart people.
Yep.
Right. So they've got a good network around them: brokers, advisors, etc., accountants, and they haven't necessarily done it all on their own. Right. So that's probably my answer.
Yep. Yeah. So for someone who's getting into property investing, it's really important to really surround yourself with the right people. The right teams to help you keep on track to grow, so that you know what to do, when to protect, when to really grow, when to take risks, and also how to really what kind of structures to also put in place, right, for building a portfolio as well.
Absolutely.
So awesome. So for your clients at the moment, what's the recent trend that you're seeing that property investors are doing right now? Good
question. So we're seeing a lot of people that are inquiring about investing into property via super, right? So setting up a self-managed super fund, and a lot of it's driven by social media as well, so TikTok and Instagram, and there's a lot of sort of buyers agents that are sort of driving that sort of narrative that's going on. So I'm not saying that it's good or bad to invest via a self-managed super fund. That just depends on your circumstances and your risk appetite. But what I will say is just be cautious. Don't get caught up in all of the things that you hear on social media to be truth, because there's a lot of it, right? The amount of content that comes out is incredible. And also, if you are being lured into buying a property, I'm not saying that's bad, but just, I suppose, try and maybe be really cautious with who it is that's your advisor, you know, because one of the stats I heard, and I haven't checked this stat, is that there's been a huge rise in buyer's agents in the last 5 years. So we're talking like a 5x increase. So which means, you know, really the question is, you know, are they well credentialed to be able to advise? Do they have experience in the industry? And a simple question is, how many properties do they have? Right? Are they putting their money where their mouth is? Or are they just intermediaries in the process? They might be an ex-real estate agent. You know, it's not a bad thing. So yeah, just be careful with who you're working with. And make sure you get the advice around how to invest, and is that the right way, whether self-managed super fund's right for you.
And with self-managed super funds, why are investors buying more, using their SMSF to buy more properties, now, like compared to before?
I think there's a lot of FOMO at the moment, because, you know, interest rates may be coming down, and generally that results in property prices going up. So there's a lot of FOMO of, I've got to get into the market. And there's also people wanting to have agency over their super, you know, sticking it in a big industry super fund and just hoping for the best. You know, some people want more control. They want to be in charge, and they may not be equipped to be in charge, but they want to be in charge, right? So I think people are making the most of that, and they're going, well, hey, I've got some super savings. I want to get into the market. I don't want to get my 5 to 7% return. I want to try and outperform that, and I'm bullish on property. So let's go. Let's do property. So that's, I think, kind of what we're seeing at the moment that is trending, and it's been trending now for probably a few years. It's been helped by the banks easing up how they go about lending for self-managed super funds. Historically, they had a much higher interest rate. They had more equity requirements, so you needed more of a deposit. But now, you know, a lot of the products, from what I'm hearing, is that, you know, they're structured very similar, you know, 80% LVR and a pretty comparable rate to an investment loan outside of super. So people go, hey, why not? That's what I'm saying.
Well, what's the main benefit for investors wanting to invest with their SMSF?
So I'm not advising that they do that, but assuming that they've come to that conclusion, I suppose it's the fact that you've got control over where your money is going. When you put it into a super fund, an industry fund, often it gets put into a basket of different funds, and you don't know underlying necessarily what is behind all of that. There might be some information, but I think it's really people wanting to have control and, you know, being in charge of their returns that they're trying to achieve.
Awesome. So recently the government has made it easier for first home buyers to buy their first property, right? I think they lowered the deposit from 10% to 5%, where they wouldn't need the mortgage insurance. What's it called again? The
LMI, Lenders Mortgage Insurance.
Lenders Mortgage Insurance. So what are your thoughts on that, and what are some of the implications for first home buyers or investors as well?
So like the most obvious outcome as a result of that policy change is the fact that there are more people that can get into the market, right? So then they can get into the market with less money, which means the demand side, you know, there's going to be more demand, which will eventually push property prices up as well. So what do I personally think about it? Look, it's not a completely bad idea. You know, it can take sometimes years to save up the deposit to get into the market, and by that time the market might have moved. So it's not entirely a bad market, but I suppose the consequences of that is it'll keep putting upward momentum in prices. So look, I don't have like necessarily a firm opinion on it, other than the fact that, hey, it gives some people opportunity that they may not have had otherwise.
And are there any anything that they need to be aware of or be careful of when, only investing, only having to spend 5% to buy their first home, right? Because sometimes, I don't know, for me, I feel like, is it too good to be true? If something's made easy, there's always a catch, or something has to give, right? So what's something that for the investor or the homeowner that they need to be aware of? Is there anything they need to be careful of?
Yeah, I think, so obviously the 95% of the purchase price is now the loan.
Yep.
Right. So it's almost, a very high percentage becomes the loan. So the so what of that is the more loan you have, the more interest you're going to pay in the fullness of time with that loan. So I suppose the only thing that I'd probably suggest is to try and accelerate how quickly you pay it off. So whilst the 5% scheme may have allowed you to get into the market, I would suggest try and rapidly generate some equity in that property by paying down some of that principal. So that way you've got some equity in the property, so it's not just pure debt against an asset.
So thank you so much, Roger, for coming to our podcast. Really, really enjoyed learning so much about how we can protect our assets, and also what are some of the things that we need to do to make sure that we're also growing our assets, right? Where should people go to if they want to learn more about you and also what you do, and if they even want to work with you as well? Yeah,
absolutely. Just connect with me on LinkedIn, right? So that's how we can stay connected. Or just shoot me an email. My details are on our website, and I'm sure it'll probably be in the show notes.
Definitely.
So feel free to reach out. Always happy to have a chat. We don't charge for initial chats, and if we can help you, great. Or if we can give you some advice and point you in the right direction, we'd be more than happy to.
Awesome. Yeah, so we'll definitely put your website links, all the links into the comments or notes. And if you're listening to the Cashflow Curiosity podcast, if you have any questions, definitely put them in the comments as well. And if you want to see any particular speaker come talk on the podcast as well, definitely let us know. And we'll see you in the next episode.
Thanks, Keith. Good on you, mate.
Awesome. Thank you, Roger.
Pleasure.